Hey, I was just hanging out in the backyard in the Great White North, having some fun during the quarantine, and I thought I would do a video on 2 things that you can do to make your overhead squat a much more productive training movement, one that you'll love, and 1 thing to avoid. I've been doing overhead squats for years. If I try to do an overhead squat with my feet parallel, hip width apart or shoulder width apart, this happens without weight. Right? It feels very awkward. It's not a very comfortable movement. Now, years ago, Pavel Tsatsouline told me to find your ultimate squatting stance, get your feet into a position and kind of wiggle them around and find the position that you can hang out in for an indefinite period with a lot of comfort. And for me, that's right there. If I bring my feet a little bit closer together, that feels awkward. Too wide apart, that doesn't feel good either. But right in here, it's not very scientific, right? But it works every time. And from there, that's my optimal squatting stance. Okay? Now, with the overhead squat though, we're changing our center of gravity up a little bit higher, shoulders crank back. You need to go a little bit wider. Most people need to go a little bit wider in order to make that happen. So if I simply go into a sumo stance, which is fine, there's no rules. Watch this. I can do a nice overhead squat. The only thing I need to remind myself, keep those knees out, keep those hips abducted, and really squeeze the glutes on the way down. Wonderful movement. Conventional stance, doesn't feel good. Sumo stance, that feels great. And all I need to do is remind myself to push my knees out, squeeze the glutes, and that's a nice solid movement. And keep that arm straight, just like that. Now, the second trick to use, which is a little bit less convenient on the fly, but works really well, is to elevate your heels. And it just happens my woodshed has probably a 3-inch step there. So let's say I wanted to do conventional stance, I can just elevate my heels on a little bit of a riser here, and then I don't need to go as wide, and oh boy, I can really do a good overhead squat that way. Full disclosure, when I filmed the videos on the beach, I knew when I was going to do overhead squats, I had a couple little holes carved out so that I could almost be on my tippy toes in the sand, and that enabled me to get a lot deeper with the squats. The last thing I want to share with you is don't do this when you overhead squat. Remember, it's not a Turkish get-up, it's not a press, it's not a windmill. You do not have to train your eyes on the kettlebell. You want to be looking straight ahead. As soon as I look up at the kettlebell, right, it messes up the movement. When I look straight ahead, lock in the core, shoulder, just like that. My eyes are looking straight ahead. If I was doing the windmill, then I would look up, but not for the overhead squat. So those are 2 tips to make your overhead squat better and 1 to avoid. And I appreciate so much the support, and if you need tutorials on other exercises, they're in my kettlebell tutorial playlist. Thanks for watching, and stay healthy during the quarantine.